and that's a great story because I've always loved the sea and ships. My dad was in the Navy for a very short amount of time. Prior to, he was down there for the Cuban Missile Crisis on an old Liberty ship, and he used to tell us sea stories, as a kid, just these funny stories. And it wasn't until the day of my retirement that he tell me how much he really didn't like his tour in the Navy. I was like, you built this up in my head so much, and I'm after, so I mean that took a big chunk of my life. It was just kind of funny that we saw it differently, but that's cool, man. So it really started at the academy, the love for the sea and the love for ships, I guess, and the love for the idea of being a command in sea, which I think is beyond reproach as far as an experience for people. I mean, you have to do so many things right, and the pressure to be a CO on any type of ship is just incredible. I mean, I have a lot of respect for those folks that train as hard as they do. There's an old expression too that surface warfare officers kind of eat their young, so it's not an easy introduction into the fleet. That's for sure.
No, we're trying to get rid of that sort of mindset. Unfortunately, that reputation, I think, is still there. I don't know if it's actually true in actuality as much as it certainly was, when you and I started.
Yeah, and I always kind of look at it that it's okay to be challenged. It's okay to be in a tough environment, and that's kind of the approach. You come aboard a ship and as an ensign, and there's just a lot to learn, a lot to do, and it is not a role for the meek, I guess, is where I was going. Less of a criticism of it. I kind of grew up in an era. I was the last chief to go through initiation, the last ones that still had initiation. So I kind of look at that time frame, and I could see things change, and I think they've changed better actually, than through all the hazing and stuff we went through. I'll never forget it, but I'll always kind of wear that as a badge of honor. So that's kind of where I was going with that. It's just a tough protocol, and if you can make it through, the different levels from ensign to getting. I think things start to settle right about the time you make lieutenant. It's a nice journey to take, but it's something you can be very proud of that you worked your way through it, because it's tough. They didn't make it easy.
No, and it shouldn't be easy.
That's right.
I think things that are worth doing in life should be challenging and hard. And, when you get through whatever that is, on the other side, you should feel a sense of accomplishment for having completed that challenge or that trying moment. And, I certainly feel that way about getting, when I got my surface warfare officer qualification, when the first time that pin was given to me that I could wear, saying that I had met those requirements and demonstrated proficiency in my field. It was not an easy road to get to it, but I certainly look back. Every day I put that thing on my uniform, I look at it and know that I accomplished something.
Yeah, it's a true badge of honor, right? And that's So I apologize if that came off as negative about the eating. I just hang it.
It's a very true statement. I mean,
yeah,
it used to be
tough.
anyway.
Yeah,
And
it's a
it's
tough
still said
environment.
today. And I think that's unfortunate, though, that we're still viewed as those that eat their young to get ahead. And I think the Navy overall is doing a better job at trying to tamp down that sort of thing, And
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to kill ourselves or kill our own people because we can. We're going to put them to work and make them work hard and challenge them, but they're going to live through it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think as traditions, as the traditions we have in the Navy have been around for so long, it was probably the toughest service to change. I think, and then like anything else, it goes through its growing pains, and change can be good and bad. But I think a lot of the change that's come about has been very positive, and I lived in an era before women were on ships, and half my career when they were allowed, and I saw the growing pains there. But to get through it, and no matter what it is, so I've been very impressed. I mean, the caste system was very much, when I first enlisted, very much in play, and I've kind of seen it go from a pretty solid caste systems to be like one team, one fight. where the lines get a little bit blurred, and we're all sailors first. So it's kind of been a neat journey, I think, for the Navy, and I think it's still by far, as I always say, it's still the most powerful mobile force on Earth. I wouldn't mess with it. So. So let's skip ahead, because I could spend all day talking about your career and on the different ships and whatnot, and I think I'll probably come back to some of that, Captain, if you're open to it, because to me, I love this stuff, and I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in it, because it's a great journey. But obviously, we wanted to talk about the Constitution quite a bit, her history and so forth. But the way I think a good approach would be to learn more about the ship is to kind of learn, what did you have to learn as the incoming commanding officer of the ship? What kind of training did you have to go through to get your arms around it? And how much did you know kind of before you got there?
All right. So that's a great question. When we go to any other platform, anything else, gray hull, metal, whatever, there's a defined educational system for going to that platform at whatever level. You're going to go to this school for this many weeks. You're going to learn this thing, and you'll be able to demonstrate proficiency at doing that by the time you get off. Right? It's pretty scripted. Well, we don't have that process even today for Constitution. There is, she is the only sailing ship in our Navy, and the simple fact of the matter is the Navy doesn't need to make people who are competent in square rig sailing anymore, except for that, those 3 officers that are there at any given time, and the 80 or so sailors that are there. Other than that, a very small subset of 500,000 people in the Navy, So the training is kind of, it's been put together over time by the current crew, and it gets built upon like, geez, we need to have the next batch know how to do whatever a little bit better than we do, and so on and so forth. So it's ad hoc training, I guess would be the best way to put it. But what that consisted of for me was I spent 2 months with the U.S. Coast Guard working on the Bark Eagle, and learning how to do square rig sailing. I'd gotten some sail training at Mass Maritime, but at the time I was going to Constitution, that was 18 something years previous to that. So it certainly wasn't anything I was proficient at. And my couple of months working with the Coast Guard and learning what those great men and women do with that beautiful ship was just absolutely amazing. I got to ride her from New London, Connecticut over to Rota, Spain.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. So I did that for a few months. On my free time, I was reading like a madman. I had known Constitution's history, but I'd known like cursory level of it.
Sure.
My predecessor had told me, and I told this to my successor, that the amount of what you're expected to know as the captain of that ship goes a lot more than what you're going to get off a Wikipedia page. And I had to become conversant with the famous captains, and the ship, who built the ship, why he built the ship, how that whole process started, how it went through the building phase, her early employment, the famous captains during the War of 1812, a couple of other famous ones that were interspersed throughout time, and it's a lot of learning. The sailors that go to Constitution, their first 6 months there are nothing but basic history lessons and practice on delivering those topics to tourists. The ship sees an ungodly amount of people any given day, never mind over the course of a year. And these young men and women have to be able to present the ship and her history to them so that they have a good understanding of what she means to the Navy now and then, or then and now, I guess would be the better way to put it.
Sure. I'm trying to think. I don't think 6 Frigates was published when you were taking over, was it?
No, it sure was.
Was it? I lose track of time because that was a great book.
It's one of the 2 foundational. There's 2 books that the ship's crew read as part of their textbooks, if you will. And 6 Frigates by Toll is one of them. The other one was actually written by one of my predecessors, the 58th in command, Commander Tyrone Martin. He wrote a book called The Most Fortunate Ship, and that one is solely about Constitution, and it's not written in the same kind of historical story style that Toll writes in,
Mm-hmm.
but rather it's absolutely more of a textbook.
I got you.
Hey, this happened. Here's who did what. But it's still I actually found it a very compelling read. But it's definitely different than the other style. Good books.
And so the course that you took through, sailing on the Bark Eagle and so forth, was that common for the incoming COs, or was that something you asked to do to get ready for it?
So I don't know when it started. It wasn't me who started it.
Mm-hmm.
My predecessor had done it, and I think his had as well. So maybe it was the guy before them. But the Constitution and the Eagle have a great relationship back and forth, and doing a lot of cross-decking of sailors to do different things. It's the problem with it is it's not written into the Navy's normal training path for the CO.
Mm-hmm.
So that process hasn't been codified as part of the educational process for that incoming CO. At least it wasn't when I was there anyway. I don't know if that's changed since. I do know the guy who took over for me. I had failed to get it codified. He failed to get it codified. So there's only a couple others since him. So maybe one of those guys was more successful than we were.
I gotcha. So the Constitution itself, it was, as it's constantly noted, it is the oldest commissioned warship afloat.
That's correct.
I've been on the Victory in London, or Portsmouth, I should say, and very impressive ship, but very different as far as going aboard a ship that is on the water versus something that is in a dry dock with hundreds of poles sticking in and out of it to keep it upright. Much deeper and cool ship, I would have to say. The Victory was neat, but maybe I'm just biased, hometown boy. But the Constitution, by far, I thought was a more interesting visit. So it's the oldest ship afloat. There's the USS Constellation down in Baltimore Harbor, but I was never sure if that's still the same ship or is that a replica ship that was built.
No, so that one's I forget what kind of ship she is, but she is not the sister ship to Constitution. She's not one of the original 6. She was the second Constellation.
Okay.
Although I believe wood from the original Constellation was included in her construction. That ship, for a while there was confusion. They thought she was the original one. Sometime around the time that I was in command, actually, they realized that no, this is the second. This is actually the second ship. And I don't recall how that all came to be public knowledge or whatnot, or what had to be done to find that out. I was just happy to say, hey, this is the only of the original 6 left, and it's mine.
Yeah, that's right. That's pretty cool. Yeah, she's a nice ship. It's a good tour. There's no doubt, and the colors are they match right up to the Constitution. But I only did it once, so I didn't have enough time to kind of compare ship for ship what were the differences or whatnot. But a nice take if you're down that way. But if we go back kind of to the ship's history, it was one of the original 6 frigates authorized by the Naval Act of 1794. There were, and if I remembering from the time from reading the 6 frigates, each one of these ships were built in a different location.
Yeah, right? It was actually an early job works program. Spread the wealth around the country, stimulate economies in different parts of our seaboard. Mm-hmm. And I think the government at the time realized that this would be a good way to kickstart that sort of thing, putting federal dollars back into local economies, while at the same time, getting the desired result of starting our Navy.
Mm-hmm. And so it was Portsmouth, Boston, Baltimore, Chesapeake, I believe. I'm trying to remember.
Gosport at the time, I believe it was called, and Philly.
Yeah, okay. Right, and then the names were all kind of government related, which was pretty cool, and they all had great histories. If for the listeners out there, if you haven't read 6 Frigates, it flows. I mean, it's a great book that dives into the history of each ship in